Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation. It is a presentation to the DePaul University executives who are here today, and it's on the digital transformation uh, which DePaul is going through currently. The team who conducted this report, which this presentation is based on, is consisting of Anuj Malve, Kashik Deswas, Luis Anderson, Magnus Junior, Yashik Punuru, and me, Tariq Refia, and I am the presenter for today. So first and foremost, little issues there. First and foremost, we can go through the situation, which are the drivers behind this digital transformation. So DePaul University is facing challenges which are prevalent in all over the landscape for higher education today. Younger generations have changing preferences, and the rise of online learning is almost facing as a substitute to higher institutions such as DePaul. Furthermore, students' selectiveness in higher education has increased. Nowadays, students are emphasizing intangible desires, which primarily consists of connecting to something larger, the larger picture that is. And the long-term risks by not taking proactive action in this stage are both tangible in the ultimate picture that would be decreased enrollment figures, and intangible as well, which is goodwill and perceived value of attending a university, which then also translates to decreased enrollment figures. So the forces driving the initiative are both external, the ones I just mentioned, as well as student loan debts, and internal, which in the Paul's case consists of departmental silos and then inefficiency to illustrate the value of attending DePaul University. So to combat this, DePaul has initiated a program called Designing DePaul. It aims to proactively mitigate these challenges and the risks associated with them and position the university in an optimal position for the future. The overarching program, Designing DePaul, includes sub-project, if you will, initiatives, and these are priority areas with different aspects of the university's transformations, which you can see on the left: digital presence, program distinction expansion, philanthropic expansion, geographical and community expansion, and lastly, institutional efficiency and effectiveness. So the biggest challenge for DePaul is to reverse the trend of declining value perception of higher education, and specifically for DePaul, and thus become a model for illustrating its true value in society, which in the longer term will translate to increased enrollment figures, among other things. And the summarized drivers would be market conditions, organizational improvement, which is effectiveness, and then strategy implementation for the organization. So the questions, well, the complication that arises from these, from the current landscape is that the digital transformation will impact the organization in all levels and in different way depending on the level and depending on the context. The digital transformation faces complications such as resistance to change due to uncertainty, adoption of adoption challenges related to new technologies and processes, and gaining buy-in from strong leadership profiles. And this includes both senior leadership and middle management, which enables the change on a more concrete level throughout the departments and stakeholders affected. They need to engage the stakeholders from all the stakeholders groups, as well as on all different levels. And then lastly, managing and communicating with stakeholders to gain buy-in from early adopters and laggards. And this also includes moving stakeholders from the late majority to the early majority through communication, which will facilitate the work later on. To be more specific, the potential program impact on IT in this case will be numerous and holistic. 3 of the 5 previously mentioned priority areas, which are digital presence, geographical and community expansion, and institutional efficiency and effectiveness, are thus far most likely to have a direct impact on the Paul's IT department. Uh, so if we start with digital presence, the initiative primarily involves marketing and IT and has the aim of innovating the way DePaul markets themselves in digital platforms. So inherently, the IT department may require new expertise, which has to be recruited. It may also include new digital capabilities, which may affect current employees' work, for example, through business processes and the like. And this will also have rippling effects because if we hire new employees, that may change team dynamics, and then we have to go through creating new teams of work and go through all the phases associated with this. Uh, as well as, yeah, potential collaboration and shared governance as work might become increasingly cross-functional. So we have to work between teams, which then raises questions of inter-team dynamics, for example, geographical and community expansion. This may impact the IT because the PAL will be seeking to reach out to potential students internationally. The primary example mentioned is India. So questions such as personal data on potential incoming students may arise, and this may impact how the IT department currently works with storing data, and security concerns would then may ripple down into changes in policies. They may require increased skill here as well, which may involve recruiting new talents, as well as training internally, which may require training programs. And then finally, collaboration with other departments, again, on this specific priority area. And the third priority area, which will mostly affect IT departments, is institutional efficiency and effectiveness. In this case, it has been mentioned that DePaul University is seeking to potentially adopt new technologies, new processes, and possibly new training, which also requires skill requirements. And this, like I mentioned before, may affect business processes and the way teams work, as well as how the teams work between each other, which is also a cultural and organizational question. Um, this will potentially have the largest impact on the IT department out of all the priority areas. And this is because the initiative aims to establish centers of excellence within their support functions, and the IT department is a support function in the Pulse case. And thus, it may impact the employee structure of the department. It may impact the governance and the processes in which they work based on how the center of excellence aligns with the current way of working. And the questions that arise from implementing these initiatives in the future will be change readiness, change leadership and sponsorship, communication and stakeholder engagement, uh, potential training and development initiatives, and lastly, change impact on the department and potential resistance to the change and how we can mitigate these and put DePaul in the optimal position to tackle these potential questions and challenges. And the answer to these challenges, we can first start by where the initiative is currently. They have gathered information from the most relevant stakeholders through information sessions. They will be taking these into account and adopt a more holistic understanding of the transformation's effect on the stakeholders and how they can move forward in developing the strategy. Furthermore, by involving these stakeholders in the process of developing the strategy, it will be more likely to move potential late adopters into the early majority and potential early majority into innovators, which will then translate to the stakeholders being more receptive to the change. And I'm referring to the adoption curve 2 slides back here. So to stay ahead of the curve, not the adoption curve in this case, the following recommendations are put forth. So the Paul has to understand who, how, where, why people and departments are impacted by these potential changes. And they need to act accordingly based on the context and understanding of how the stakeholders are impacted. So for example, the effect on the IT department might not be the same as for the marketing department, although these will collaborate together increasingly as a consequence of the initiative, the program, that is, sorry. And the individual initiatives or priority areas will also impact the university in different ways. So we need to understand that and then act accordingly based on the context. They need to have continued emphasis on stakeholder engagement, which they've done terrifically so far. They need to continue vocalizing the effort from top down, which they have done so far. Starting the whole initiative was the president of the university, but they also need to involve middle management more to drive the change forward by getting their buy-in. And this can be done by communicating the value of the transformation and the subsequent change to the middle management to get their buy-in. For training and development initiatives, it's important to equip the employees with the necessary skills, as well as adopt the IT capabilities which can enable further operational improvement. And here I'm referring to if, for example, we have increased privacy and security concerns, we need to be able to tackle these and have the expertise in-house if we do have it, or maybe recruit the expertise to respond to these challenges and put ourselves in the optimal position. Lastly, we need to cultivate a culture of change. This is done by engaging and enabling the organization. And subsequently, this is done by communicating the vision, removing the obstacles, and generating short-term wins. The short-term wins can illustrate the value of the change. And thereafter, the change should be implemented and sustained and continuously improved. So the answer is based on the following slides. First and foremost, the lessons learned from conducting or writing this report is that the DePaul wants to move towards being a organization which illustrates and works with interdependence, adaptability, growth and development, and integration. These are all hallmarks of companies which, according to Cameron and Green's organizational metaphors, are towards the organism type company as opposed to a machine which is dominant, hierarchical. So we can see here that the current alignment in blue and the ideal alignment in orange. To move towards the ideal alignment in the DePaul's case, according to us, they need to move towards being more collaborative, integrated, and interdependent between departments, which is partially what the whole designing DePaul aims to do. And if they're able to do so, they will move more towards the orange part of the diagram, which is where they want to be for the future as a modern organization. And regarding organization transformation practices, here we can map out what DePaul currently does, their best practices, and then we can give them a rating between 1 through 5 as to their organizational maturity level. So firstly, organizational impact assessment. So here we need to conduct a thorough assessment to understand the potential organizational readiness and challenges and impact of our change. And in DePaul's case, they conducted information sessions and surveys to gather information and feedback to analyze and understand the organizational feedback. As they did it on a program level, where all of the different initiatives can be viewed as separate projects, they're given a 3 since it's broad in the organization, but they don't have organization standards as of yet, which doesn't give them a 4 in this case. Risk analysis, from the information we've gathered, they have not done a risk analysis thus far, but the best practices suggest mapping out risks, assessing the degree of risk, for example, low, medium, high in a tabular format, and then developing actions to mitigate the probability of the risk actualizing. Currently, they are ranked as a 1 because we have no information as to if they've done it so far. On a communication plan, we should have a communication plan which spans the whole program. We should have established roadmaps for specific projects. And the key questions the communication strategy should answer is, who communicates, what gets shared, what medium, what formats, when do we communicate, and what's the frequency of communication, and then how is the feedback from that communication managed. The PAL has a well-developed communication plan thus far. This is referring back to the information sessions where they gather feedback. They include all the stakeholders through specific mediums. They have specific frequencies. They have several sessions per priority area. So going forward, this communication plan has still not been established, but thus far they're illustrating a fairly mature behavior on this front. So therefore, it's a 3, and the same logic applies since they've done it on a program level in this case, but there are still not organization-wide standards. It's a 3 and not a 4. Governance model. So in this context, since we're talking about the IT department mostly, we can talk about shared digital units. A shared digital unit creates digital services for the rest of the organization, a support unit, in other words. If done properly, it should reduce cost by reducing redundant initiatives, people, and technologies in local units. And in the Pulse case, the priority area institutional efficiency and effectiveness aims to create centers of excellence across support functions. And the purpose is to improve responsiveness and enhance collaborations across domains. So this special one, because we could say that currently they are ranked as a 2, but they're striving towards going to a 3. And because they currently have them and are seeking to implement them, they're given a 3 with a forecasting view, if you may. And business process changes. Here we need to ensure alignment between the things we're redesigning and the potential new business processes to the digital transformation. So we need to make sure they're aligned so that we can realize the value and the outcomes we're seeking to realize. And here, thus far, they've understood that business processes will change. They're gathering stakeholder feedback, which will be taken into account, but they still haven't gotten very far on that front. Therefore, they're given a 2 in this case. Training plan. Still no training plan has been developed, which is understandable because they're still in the beginning phases of the transformation. But the best practices suggest that they should develop training plans which ensure employees are equipped with the necessary skills to realize the benefits of the available technology. And here, once again, we want to realize the outcomes and the strategy we're setting forth, the benefits we can derive from it. And training plan enables this. And these are the organization transformation practices that we have assessed through the PAL, and also some other ones which they haven't done so far, but we will be suggesting that they do in order to optimize the transformation effort. As goes for an implementation plan, in this case, what I was referring to before, they haven't gotten so far yet as they're still gathering the information. And the implementation plan is based on their organizational assessment, which is then mapped to Cotter's supporting theory of the 8 stages of change. And here, the first step is to consolidate stakeholder information from design sessions and feedback. They need to define the success in terms of the changes. Where do they want to go based on the information they gathered and where they want to go? They need to identify misalignment between where the company wants to go and is currently at, gap analysis, if you will, and define the impact in terms of change of culture. How will the different levels of hierarchy react to the change, and in different contexts as well, for that matter? They need to define their approach to change management. How do they best approach change? Can they mitigate risk somehow? Through communication, for example, if they get middle management buy-in, can that mitigate the risk of resistance between departments or inside departments or even on an individual level? Thereafter, they need to develop and implement a communication plan, which should span the entirety of the program. They need to identify the processes that will change because of the implementation and they need to communicate how the approach will impact stakeholders. What will the definition of success look like? How will it benefit the company? And there comes the linkage between the values and behaviors, which is a cultural matter. And to the right, we can see the owners of these different action areas of the implementation plan. And after communicating, they need to gather feedback and analyze the feedback of the program's outcome and stakeholder impact and satisfaction. Once again, as this is an emergent approach, which the organization is currently taking on, they need to maybe reevaluate throughout the implementation of these changes, depending on how it goes. So therefore, it's imperative to gather feedback and analyze the feedback. We need to, step 5, for example, in the supporting theory, says enabling employees to make the change. We can map these to the theory in order to optimize our solution. And lastly, we need to monitor the impact on operational efficiency, effectiveness, and additional key metrics. So these last 2 points can be seen as almost post-implementation. What is the effect the implementation is having? How is it improving? Are we realizing our benefits? And these will subsequently be based on potential OKRs or KPIs that the organization has set forth. And it's also the 8th step and the 7th step as well. We need to build on the successes we've created, but also make the change stick so that at the end of the day, it's not something temporary and it will not stick, simply put. So impact on stakeholders for the specific IT department, as I mentioned previously, there might be newly formed teams, which requires going through the development phases of new teams. There might be new digital capabilities, which in turn translates to, can we use this and utilize these capabilities in the best way to realize the value? Do we need to recruit new talent? If we recruit new talent, how will this affect team dynamics? There might be new business processes. How will that affect the current way of working? Do we have redundant employees in some cases? Do we need to reorganize our structure? There will also be increased collaborations with other departments, which is inter-team working. So questions of collaboration between teams, how we can effectivize that arise, and also training plans in some cases. So if we don't want to recruit and we don't currently have the expertise across the board, then we might have to train our employees to utilize the benefits that we have through our new digital capabilities. On an organizational level, there will be organizational changes, which may include structures. It may include cultural changes as well, and also the previously mentioned IT impact as well across several departments and across the different priority areas or initiatives. So monitoring and evaluating the program going forth. Thus far, the monitoring has been very transparent. To the left here, we can see how they monitored it and how they communicated it through the stakeholders. They had a website where we could see how far we've gotten in the information sessions for each priority area. As for the continuous performance of the entire program, an integrated performance management system could be utilized. It would allow for centralized overview of the program performance, and this would subsequently be taken over by potential centers of excellence to maintain the change and optimize and continuously improve the changes we've made. Current KPIs are stakeholder satisfaction surveys conducted semi-annually. So overall stakeholder satisfaction score across different departments and such, and students as well, which is the ultimate goal of the whole transformation initiative. We want to improve students' experiences with Paul and reach out to new and more potential students. We can also have continuous information sessions with stakeholder groups to generate feedback on the program's impact and progress. We can conduct employee engagement surveys semi-annually, and here we can utilize employee engagement index. How engaged are they currently, the employees, and how engaged are they going forward as well, meaning during the implementation and even after the implementation. So future KPIs must also be developed as we go forth, depending on what we implement. It might have different consequences to how we operate currently. So therefore, we need to implement more KPIs to assess the benefits gained from the transformation. OKRs can also be set as goals to assess improvements and how well the change has been driven. So forward-looking numbers as well. Future recommendations for the PAL. They need to cultivate a cultural change which emphasizes collaborations, interdependence, adaptability, growth, and development. This goes back to the spider matrix I illustrated previously. The PAL wants to go or move towards being a more organism type organization, and therefore they need to exhibit these traits which enable them to become one. They need to continue and even improve feedback loop from stakeholders. They need to keep stakeholders engaged, and they also need to prioritize and modify changes based on this feedback loop. And that's also why they need to keep improving it continuously to get this feedback in, analyze it, consolidate it, and then take actions based on the information they've gathered. They need to establish mechanisms that enable continuous monitoring and evaluation of impact on business outcomes. And this ties back to what I just said, which is having KPIs now, having KPIs relevant for the implementation, but also having KPIs for after, as well as OKR, which are forward-looking metrics. And it also goes back to the potential of establishing centers of excellence. These can be the mechanisms, but also leverage other mechanisms that enables continuous monitoring and evaluation because they're centered and they can radiate, if you will, the new benefits that we aim to derive from the transformation. And lastly, we need to invest in training and development to equip our employees with the necessary skills to utilize technology and realize the value we aim to get from the whole program and the transformation. So conclusively, designing the PAL aims to tackle both internal and external challenges with the purpose of improving student experience, organizational culture, efficiency, as well as strengthen the PAL's connection both locally and internationally. The primary challenges includes resistance to change and adoption challenges, and organizational changes may result in concerns as well regarding job security if we end up in a situation where we'll require organizational changes. The IT department has a central role in the digital transformation. Much of the new and increased collaboration will go through the IT department. New capabilities for the IT department may allow the PAL to realize the intended outcomes of the entire initiative, which is why they have a central role. The challenges specific for the IT department may include business process changes, newly composed teams, even maybe international teams, new capabilities, changed governance, and potential need for training plans, which all require change management aspect to them as well. How can we optimize this? What kind of teams do we have currently? How can we move them forward? And when creating new teams, how can we ensure that they have a high degree of efficiency and collaboration between each other? The questions that arise from the situation and complication are regarding change readiness, change leadership, sponsorship, communication, stakeholder engagement, training and development, initiatives, and lastly, change, impact, and resistance. And the answers, the last part, is the answers to the questions are primarily continuous emphasis on stakeholder engagement and development of the feedback loop. Further, they need to cultivate a culture of change by engaging stakeholders through communication, and they need to engage them throughout. And lastly, like I've mentioned several times, is that the PAL is trying to move towards being a more organic company, which reference to the Morgan metaphors. And they must also cultivate the trademark of being such an organization, which is central to their transformation program and through these specific initiatives. So lastly, are there any questions? Thank you so much for listening. And following will be the appendices, which is the frameworks and theories which the presentation and the report is based on. Here we have Morgan's organizational metaphors, Cotter's 8-step model, and Cardinal's change management model. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.